This is the Project Management Podcast. We bring project management to beginners and experts. Find us on the web at pm-podcast.com or send your emails to info@pm-podcast.com. Hello and welcome to part 1 of episode 161. I am Cornelius Fichtner. This is the Project Management Podcast. Nice to have you with us. And yes, you heard me right. This is a two-parter. Earlier this year, PMI announced that CEO Gregory Balestrero was going to step down. Later on, it was further announced that COO Mark Langley had been named as his successor. And then at the 2010 PMI North American Congress in Washington, D.C., the members of the PMI's new media council, which I am a part of, had the opportunity to sit down with Greg and Mark to discuss the past and the future. I brought my recording equipment, and today you'll hear part 1 of this interview. Part 2 will come your way next week. And just for your information, the members of the new media council that you'll hear asking questions are Josh Nankivil, Dave Garrett, Bas de Bar, myself, and the first question comes from Charlize Nolsch.
Perfect. Well, I guess maybe I'll start with a question for you, Greg. Pretty basic, but what would you consider maybe your legacy or your greatest accomplishment if you had to pick one or two things? What was the kind of the key for you?
I made it. I think it's hard to take credit for any accomplishment, that I did this thing, because everything that we did as a team. It was impossible to do individually. And, in terms of what I feel is a great thing about PMI is that the community has become, is whole. I think that is a great thing. There are 74 countries represented here, and they know each other, and we know them. So we've gone up over 3 times in size, and now we're in 180 countries. And the 5th highest attendee group was Nigeria, and they have as many members as China. So, and they know us because they've been back and they brought more people, and so that's a great community structure that I think is a powerful legacy that I feel I'm a part of, but not an accomplishment of me alone. The second thing has to do with how PMI is viewed, and I think that's critical. Mark and I laugh about one of my first experiences with senior executives in trying to understand why I was even in the meeting and what all this talk about projects were. And it was followed up by a meeting with the dean of a management school, and I said the project management discipline, and before I got the whole word out, he interrupted me and said, project management is a discipline, it's a course. And fast forward to tape 8 years, and we are now, we had a quickly thrown together Global Accreditation Council meeting. 65 faculty attended, all wanted to figure out how to be accredited in a university program, either as a bachelor's or master's in project management. And we're now getting calls without going out and hustling the field for people that want the experts to tell them about things like the upcoming Olympics, disaster recovery from the earthquake in Haiti, the mining accident, and we're now seeing the fact that we're becoming far more influential and are far more respected as experts in this field, and that businesses are starting to realize it's about execution, which is what we're about, business results, and that we have something to say. And so those two things are the things that really, boy, when I go to bed at night, I thank myself for having been able to be a part of that.
If I might follow up on that, I have a very similar question that Charlize has, but I'd like to focus on what is your fondest memory in the last 8 years?
Mark becoming CEO. You asked. I mean, I really do. I think that Mark and I built a very strong team. We were a strong team together, still are, at least for another month or so. He's measuring my office, making sure it's furniture. No, seriously, I mean,
already gone.
Yeah, I haven't been back in a couple of weeks, so I may get there and they'll go, no, your stuff's in boxes. No, I think there are plenty of fond memories. I mean, the most recent that comes to mind is Mark's, because it's so profound and so strategic for the organization. And fondness, to me, is fulfillment. And I absolutely, in a great way, feel quite fulfilled that we have prepared the organization for succession. So when I think about the decision, the board appointed a search committee. The board asked the search committee to work with one of the top 5 recruitment firms in the world. The board said there are no geographic boundaries. I think close to 300 applicants, very senior executives, applied for this from the for-profit, not-for-profit segments from all over the world. Went through the rigor of screening the candidates, interviewing Mark, then went through the rigor of interviewing 3 finalists and then picked Mark. And they said, we're in a horse race, and we don't want to, we want our horse, PMI, has to continue in this race, and we need a jockey that's going to run this race well. And they had the respect. And it wasn't about me. Mark was prepared. He knew all the processes. He knew everything. But they had to get to know Mark and make the decision that he was the kind of executive they wanted going forward. So they did, and they chose him, and that's great. Now, on a smaller basis, there are 2 incidences that I have to tell you about that are my fondest memories. 2 nights ago, a gentleman came up, and I had seen him at previous congresses, and he says, listen, I just wanted to say goodbye, thanks for all you did, which is, a lot of people have been very generous with their comments, but he said, one of the things I want to tell you about it, and I remembered him from Atlanta. He says, in Atlanta, I was my first time chapter leader, and you were going to dinner with the board and being hurried off to dinner, and you saw me standing alone, and there were 2 groups of chapter presidents right next to him, both getting ready to go out to dinner, laughing and joking, and he was alone. So I went over to him, and I had seen him at the LIM, the Leadership Institute meeting, and I shook his hand, and I said, what are you doing? He says, well, I'm just trying to figure out what to do for dinner. I said, hold on a second. And I went over to one of the groups who all knew me, and I introduced him to them, and I said, he's alone tonight. And they said, oh, we'll take him to dinner. And they did. I had forgotten all about that. So he came up and thanked me for that. So that was a very special moment. The other one, which I think is what we have to remember PMI is about, I was in Sao Paulo in 2008 for our Congress there. And it was jammed. They had capped it at 1,000. 1,300 showed up. They said, we can't allow any more than 1,300, and they smiled and laughed and came in anyway. And I always said, there's a fire hazard. Yeah, there's a fire hazard. They all come in, and I'm going up, and a guy runs up to me, and he says, I have to talk to you. He's a young man. Well, they're all young in Brazil, and very handsome guy, and looks like a poster child for project management. And he, in broken English, he said, I have to thank you. And I said, I'm thinking, okay, I opened the door for him. I got him a meal. And he says, I heard you speak 2 years ago, and I was very excited about PMI after I heard you speak, and I got involved. I got my PMP, and now I have a much higher paying job, and I wanted to thank you for your help. I said, well, that was PMI. He said, yes, it is PMI, but what it's done is help for the prosperity of my family. My family really appreciates this. So that gave me meaning for this, and those are the human interest stories that we have that really make a difference for me. So, and it's all about people. Mark, those people, it's all about people. So,
an interesting follow-up to that would be sort of the vision angle from Mark's perspective. Greg kind of listed out some very tangible examples. Sort of taking people's recognition of project management from the course level to the discipline level, doing a lot of things like that. By the end of your tenure, what do you see, happening? What do you see? What accomplishment would you like to have had happen during your tenure here?
Do we know how long my tenure is going to be? I'm not sure yet, but
He will have much more gray hair, I can assure you.
Or none
That'll
at all.
happen in
Or
6
none at
months,
all,
or
yeah.
none at all.
I can say one thought, like, what is your vision for the future? You know?
Yeah, sure.
You know.
Well, the good news about having been a part of the last 9 years and working directly with the board of directors with Greg on the strategies, I'm pretty well entrenched and have heavily influenced the current strategy of PMI. So I think we're on the right track, and it's just a matter of how fast we can accelerate in certain areas and maybe how we might do some things differently as we learn more. For me, it still revolves around the professional aspects of project management, the recognition of project and program management as a profession, continuing with the great advocacy work that the Institute has done, both in business and government, to get the recognition. Some pockets clearly recognize it. It's not an issue. They get it. They're developing career paths. There's many, many more organizations that don't. I think the government speakers that we've had here this week demonstrate how they're still struggling with it. Greg mentioned earlier in his comments that businesses get that project management's about execution. You're hearing the governments, at least in the U.S. federal government side, talking this week around they're getting to understand that it's the PPM workforce that's about execution and how do they align that workforce. So at a top level, continuing to advocate and have PMI remain the global advocate for the profession. And at the end of that time, if I'm here long enough, don't know how long it's going to take, project management will be recognized as a profession in every corner, not just the pockets where it is today. So that's one area. The other, Greg mentioned that my real passion is around people. If you were here earlier, you might have heard me say it in just my opening remarks, but I also said it to the leadership meeting if you were there. My feeling and philosophy and feeling from the time I started to have any kind of visibility or vision in organizations that I worked for is that when I watched things go really well, it was always about people, and the people where the best people were, the best results were, and it didn't matter whether they were the most degreed person, the longest experienced person. It was the quality of the individual and their commitment to the mission. And so for so long as that is the case, which in my world it'll be forever, PMI will continue to focus on people, first and foremost the membership. Membership is a highly strategic area for PMI. It'll remain that way, but also non-member certified professionals and so on. So the practitioner community, and the better we can help them prepare to work in their organizations, whatever they are, the more likely they'll be successful, the more likely the organizations will be successful. So we'll have a focus at a top level on advocating for the profession, but we'll continue to maintain a real thrust on the development of people and serving those people towards some of the things Greg's mentioned, which is bettering their lives, bettering the results of the organization. Because that's the feeling in an association. You guys might probably know I spent 20 years in the for-profit world before I ever joined a not-for-profit association. And most of the companies I worked for did pretty well. And the metric was how much money did you make, right? So it was pretty easy that way. When you get to an organization like this, it's about passion for the mission and results. And you marry those two things up, coupled with a 5,000 to 6,000 volunteer workforce around the world, it's hard not to get energy. You walk into those leadership meetings and you hear what they're doing, the innovation that takes place at that level, it's easy to get really excited about getting up the next day.
Question in regards to something that Kundra said yesterday. He was talking about in the federal government having a team of project managers across multiple agencies, and in line with the government and the aerospace and defense SIGs becoming the communities of practice. I think the aerospace and defense one is still in transition right now. But is there any plans for more of a formal partnership with the federal government, specifically in the United States, to grow those communities of practice and use them as a resource in the federal government?
Well, I would say not only in the federal government, but governments worldwide and businesses as well. Part of the strategy of integrating the former SIGs and colleges into communities of practices within PMI, so instead of 32 separately incorporated organizations with, if they had strategies and knowledge strategies, they maybe were at best disparate. Maybe if they were aligned, it was good luck versus planning. Part of the vision around that was to have an integrated strategy towards knowledge and community. And the community you're talking about is in the U.S. federal government, but it goes beyond that. So we will, whether we use them to form partnerships directly with a government or business really is largely dependent on the need of on the other side. But clearly we're going to use them as a resource, and already are using them as a resource to build relationships with organizations. I can give you an example. The former Design, Procurement, and Construction SIG, we had a meeting earlier. Oh, this is already Monday. Last week we had a meeting. Tuesday. Last Tuesday with some of the leading engineering and construction companies that was promoted and sponsored by the DPC community practice, and the goal of which is to form an executive advisory council with the largest, or not necessarily largest, but engineering construction companies to identify project and program management needs within their organization so that PMI together can build whatever it needs to support that, whether it's a community, whether it's methodology or an extension to the PMBOK guide, perhaps a new certification. Doesn't really, we have no clear vision. What we wanted to do was get them in the room to hear the need, and from there collectively they're going to be aligned towards solving that need. So there's real concrete examples, and that's just one. I mean, there's others that as soon as they can get transitioned, we'll be working in that direction.
In the past, well, it's still active. We've had that agreement with the Defense Acquisition University in a reciprocity for the credential. If you're a PMP, and they'll give you credit for certain courses. NASA can be considered a partner of ours. They probably have the most rich relationship with us. Their Academy for Project Program and Engineering Leadership, APPLE, is a post-Columbia disaster effort to bring together disciplined engineering, systems engineering, and program management so that there's a high degree of understanding across those disciplines and they understand the roles that each play. Those are models that can be used to expand across. Now, one of the challenges we have, we had a study done. I think you all know about the study about the value of project management. And one of the aha moments that came out of that study was the issue of fit. And a couple of the folks that were in there, Floor and CH2M Hill, there is no question that their core competency is project and program management, because that's why they win contracts, because they know how to deliver the projects and programs. The challenge going forward is what's the right fit for project and program management in the government, and that's where we can help them. And I think yesterday's keynote speaker, who by the way is one of the most approachable fellows, we had lunch with him afterwards. He wants to work with us. He feels that what they need is a leadership educational program that isn't just about acquisitions, but about project and program leadership, and to prepare executives for those levels. So, I think that whole idea, helping them wrestle with fit and understanding it, and then shaping the discipline, if you will, for the federal government. And there is no bottle. There's no company. There aren't too many $3 trillion companies around. There's only one $3 trillion government. God knows my taxes are high enough to support that. So there's no other, who do you go to? They come to us. And we can help them resolve the fit and then build a system with them.
Yeah, I think to your earlier point around, if I could just add, I'd ask Greg what's some of the changes or some of the things that he's maybe fond of or proud of and accomplishments. I think if you went back 9 years or 8 years ago, if we tried to even get into a media publication of some sort, just to get a mention, they didn't know who we were. And I think the best part of the last 8 years, besides the community of the members and practitioners that Greg mentioned, is that there is now recognition around project management, and at least to a degree, or to a large degree, we are affiliated with that. And it's not about us getting our name in the New York Times or the Financial Times or somewhere. It's about the recognition that project management means something to organizations. And now they're out searching for someone who can talk to them about it. That didn't exist 8 years ago. It did not exist. At least in our perspective, it didn't exist, the world we were in.
And that's so true. And the real challenge, and Mark is perfectly suited to lead the organization going forward. The real success is when organizations have an expectation about success that's realized or exceeded by the professionals that they hire. When there's a gap, they don't. So the greatest new initiative we have going forward, and it's just in the infantile stage, it's not even an adolescent stage, is our organizational market strategy, as we create a stickiness for organizations to be affiliated with us and to help them wrestle with fit and how fit, actually, they have an obligation. An example of how organizations can fail themselves in the profession is this misunderstanding about what a credential is. So people feel that credentials guarantee expertise, and these HR professionals and leaders abdicate their responsibility for interviewing. So whether you're a PMP or an MBA, that doesn't make you qualified to take on. Fit is an issue, and rigor in interviews and rigor in challenging the resume and experience is critical. It's the difference between a resume and a transcript. You need them both together and be rigorous about assessing them. And I think what Mark is challenged with is bringing those organizations in and having their confidence level go up and up that we're their premier advisor when it comes to business results.
Mark, what do you see your first challenge in the next, couple of months?
Well, the first challenge is filling a set of big shoes. How's that sound? If you were here at all the last couple of days, Greg's built a great, reputation for PMI, and he certainly is going to be sorely missed. But from a challenge standpoint, I think one of the few early things that I think we still need to address is really aligning the value chain of PMI, and we've done much more of that over the last 2 to 3 years, but we have a long way to go. When I joined PMI, which was almost 9 years ago, it was a highly fragmented organization. Still very strong, still very well thought of, but highly fragmented. There was a little strategy behind many of the pieces that were built, implemented, launched. They were each individually successful, but we spent the first part of our time together kind of getting them to work more optimally together, and now it's really along the lines of aligning that value chain and continuing to do that. We've done quite a bit of that over the last 3 to 4 years. You see collaboration in ways that you've never seen collaboration in PMI. That's going to be a critical part of my first year going forward, is to continue to build a collaboration with all stakeholders, but especially the internal group, the internal value chain of PMI, whether it's chapters, communities of practice, registered education providers, academic universities, and organizations. There's quite a bit of work to be done in that area, and we have to continue the momentum. We can't let it slip. The great news is every one of them wants to do that. The chapters are anxious to get more involved, more engaged, more integrated. They want to have more support. Same with the RAP community. How can we help? But how can you help us? Academic universities, Greg mentioned in an earlier meeting, the pipeline is filling with those interested in becoming accredited, but even more importantly, the pipeline is filling with those wanting to teach full-time degree programs in project management. That's all the value chain for project management, not just PMI's value chain, project management's value chain. And that's where I'm going to focus a lot of my energy in the first year.
Yeah, and that's that the way you categorized it, I think, is really spot on, because and that goes to this issue that the community is finally aware that we are a community, and we all have a responsibility. And when we talk about the value chain, people say, well, let's focus on the Y generation, and what we need to focus on is the pipeline. Always the pipeline, and that's a value chain. How do you get more students in? Well, it's not simple. You don't say, oh, look at all the university programs. You give them scholarships, you give them fellowships. You have to nurture the faculty, let the faculty have a place to publish, attract them to PMI, get them good jobs. Once they're in work, then you have to worry about their continuing ed. And that's what Mark said. We have all the power in this community. But aligning it, you might tell them a little bit about the channel management issue that you've been working on with the team.
It's a big piece of how we're going to get there, which is earlier this year, earlier in 2010, we launched an initiative internally to look at building a framework for channel management. Obviously, it's a very business-oriented term, but it's really about the value chain, everyone that contributes in that value chain. But we needed to use a term that all the parties were familiar with. And it includes all those stakeholders I mentioned: chapters, REPs, organizations, academic institutions. And it's around lining the best roles and responsibilities in a framework to deliver value to the ultimate stakeholder, which are members, organizations, government institutions, academic universities. The first pilots will come out working with chapters as part of that. Now they're an internal channel, they're part of PMI, but it's still an avenue towards delivering value. And we're going to look at with the REP community, how they partner together, but also how we support academic institutions, because chapters are perfectly situated to be the representative for PMI with universities and colleges, because they don't move around a lot unless it's a virtual university. Most universities have a pretty big footprint near one of our chapters, and they're perfectly aligned to do that. So we have a program, we built the framework, and we're going to start to run pilots. There was a presentation this week at the Leadership Institute meeting on it. And it's going to be a great program. It's the beginning of, I should say, it's the middle of aligning the value chain of PMI.
On that, I just came from a session for academic academic programs in project management, and with the alignment of the local chapters, some of the questions that came out in there, we had some people from industry who were talking about. I run a PMO at a corporation, and I want to find interns that I can bring in that are going to these university programs and, utilize them, give them experience, recruit them into my organization eventually, that type of thing. So is there anything going forward with the universities and with the chapters that can really leverage what you got there and be able to provide that internship, kind of a residency type of program?
Yeah. So of course, the challenge is always knowing about a need like that first, so we can find a way to make the solution visible. But we have an entire academic program now that's working on building an academic resource center for universities. So that's more focused towards them. But we also have in this organization market strategy that Greg mentioned, and the adolescent stages of building value-based relationships so that we understand their needs. So for really significant organizations that perhaps employ or hire FTEs or contractual project management resources, we're working with them on a nearly one-to-one basis, trying to understand their needs and support them. So we have on staff, we have what we call account managers. We're building these relationships based on their need versus what we offer. It could be that we don't offer anything they need, but we're perfectly placed to be the facilitator, the enabler of the solution. And we have those relationships, whether they exist in chapters, which might be the one for the academic and the business, which is the chapter works with the academic institution, which helps the organization get the intern for a PMO, or the REP community or some other group that we have a relationship with. So it's really the role that we can play. Some of it might be we have the solution, or we're the right person or group to build the solution. Others, we will facilitate it. And I think between the academic strategy, the organization market strategy, and our internal value chapters, PMI globally and so on, we're well placed. The issue is getting after the need.
And you realize how special that is that somebody raised that. 9 years ago, companies didn't think about that. If you manifested it, can you imagine if universities had co-op programs for project managers, like they do with engineers? Mm-hmm. Then the university, academia, industry are working together to bring people online that are talented. And that's a pretty incredible step from where we were 9 years ago to where we are now, where they're saying, I wish I had an intern in project management.
And from my perspective, I work with a lot of students, and they're either students or in an academic setting, or they're new project managers, or they want to get into project management, and they're clamoring for it too. They're like, where can I go and do an internship? I'll work for free. I don't need to get paid. There's definitely a need there from both sides.
And that was part one of our interview with Gregory Balestrero and Mark Langley. Part 2 will come your way in the next episode. That's it for today. Thank you very much for listening. As always, you can find us on the web at pm-podcast.com. If you are a PMP or a PGMP and you're looking for a simple and effective way to earn your PDUs, then podcasting is the way to go. Try our sister podcast, the PDU Podcast. Get a new webinar and at least one new PDU every month on autopilot. Stop by at pducast.com. That's pducast.com. Please send your emails to info@pm-podcast.com. And when you write, yes, please tell me where in the world you are writing from. And finally, we have this. Project plans are only good intentions until they immediately degenerate into hard work. Until next time.